So, good morning, folks. How are we all doing? Don't all jump in and answer at once. Okay, let me jump down to our area. Now, and get the kitchen sink out. So I'm assuming you're all seeing that clearly, visibly,
Yep.
Yeah.
perfectly even. Of course, yeah. Okay, okay. Right. Uh, I would have had some queries on the current assignment and some points for clarification. Um, Again, you remember, you may remember, or some of you may remember, I did say to you, don't rush ahead. Don't. I mean, we have essentially a month before your assignment is due, 19th of April. And I had said to you, don't be rushing ahead on all of the stuff. You don't have all the cards in the deck. And so, for example, today's presentation or lecture would have, stuff, not to be too explicit and hand holding, but a lot of stuff that would say, didn't think of it from that perspective, or I should have used this and I should have used that. So, anyway, um, it will certainly alleviate some of the panic and some of the concerns that based on what I've been show going anyway. They're either in or they're out.
Yeah, Mark, that's quite consistent with what we had this morning and actually this week. So
Does anyone know why people?
I think a lot of people are under pressure with some work commitments.
Okay, it'll be interesting to see who's looking at the videos afterwards. To keep up to speed on the stuff. Just bear with me 1 second, please. I just need to do some quick check here. I need to do. I know they've been talking about attendances and all that sort of stuff, but I have a different way of doing these things. Hang on a second. And screen capture, job done. Right. Yeah, the college is a bit particular about attendances, understandably. Okay, enough the banter. I assume anyway, from what I'm seeing and so on, I'm getting that people are already kicked off and onto the assignment. Obviously, so. I suppose the one thing that had been coming up was well, from a couple of people, and the two parts, analyze the supply chain and then do a SWOT, and there seemed to be some confusion on that. And this is one of the reasons why I was saying don't be jumping ahead, because some of the tools, some of the models and bits you'll see here today, you have to think of your strategic management module as well. All these modules are the subject matter is integrated. They're not standalones by any stretch. Strategy covers every functional area. Even within functions, they all have their own strategies as well, which support. So always think of it as a pyramid, that there's a cascading effect, higher ordinate levels of strategy, tactics, plans, and business plans, and so on, so on, so on. And
Mark, we actually done the broader strategic management module in semester one.
I know that, and this is the point I'm talking to you about, because there's some students are not clear about what's happening or what to do on two elements of it, and that's what I'm saying. You need to look at this higher ordinate strategic process before you go into your SWOT. Some people are thinking that, oh, well, we have to do the SWOT. That's part of it. Isn't that part of the strategic analysis? Not the way the assignment is structured. I explicitly bring it down because I I wanted you to focus explicitly on the strengths and weaknesses, because that's something that you can do, or you do something about. Essentially, they're actionable. The external opportunities and threats are outside your controls. You can obviously put plans in place for them, but more importantly, for the benefit of the assignment, to give you some meat to be able to discuss and analyze, to focus on the internals, which are the strengths and weaknesses. But before you even get to that, you have to be able to analyze, the supply chain, the business, the company, and the supply chain that it operates in. So, and that's why in the very start you would have been introduced to strategy. This is what it's all about, down to the grassroots. Now you're coming back up again and trying to link both the holistic and grassroots views. Are we clear? Helping you along, I'm sure it is. Anyway, let's get moving on this. Discussions. What we're going to cover, again, we're going to come back and delve a little bit deeper into the supply chain relationships themselves, how these are evolving. Look at models for developing, implementing, and successful supply chain relationships. And then the imperative for collaborative relationships and so on, and then third-party logistics industry as it has evolved into. So again, like everything else, you have the drivers down here in the bottom left, supply and demand. Always think of it. You can safely bet that for most industries, if a high 90s percentage, that you're going to be operating in a pull system. Okay, demand is going to pretty much drive everything, and based on that, they're the diktats, and then you just have to match it by. When you think about it, the model is really simple. It's just that we put layers and layers on top onto the onion to almost make things look more complicated than they actually are. So then we look at the supply chain and trading partners. So again, because of the complexities of products, services, and the demands of supply of customers or clients, we can't do these things on our own anymore. You have to have somebody. I mean, even down to very basics. You have probably websites in your respective organizations. Are you doing that internally? Maybe you have some IT people that can do something, but generally speaking, you'll outsource it or outsource parts of it. Why? Because you don't have the skills. They've become extremely complex. There's a lot, even down to the graphic design of it, of a website, for argument's sake. These require specialist expertise and skills. So you're looking at, no matter what way you approach problems inside an organizations, you are going to have to either co-opt or partner or buy in or lease or rent or contract skills that don't exist inside in your own organization. And that's why our openness to more partnership development has to be fundamental to existence and growth, more importantly. And of course, then you have the supply chain and the organizational strategy. So we have to build our strategies around what we already have and what where we think the industry and the business is going. Okay, that's the premise of all this. So then if we look at the range of relationships, we have just the straightforward transactional, little or no integration and collaboration. Tough surviving in those environments. Then more of a collaborative, and then more towards strategic alliances. More strategic alliance and highly relational. So we're looking at companies, as I said before, some cases, sharing with competitors, and certainly on the supply chain to optimize and reduce your supply chain costs, your landed cost. So the models here now, implementing a successful model. If we look at this heresy, I will call it, well, particularly because of my pedantic quality, characteristic, pain in the ass, call it what you will. But even as a flow diagram, it's incorrectly represented. Now, any of those of you from an engineering background will spot the faults a mile away. But just for clarity, even though they're moot points, you wouldn't spot them normally. Diamonds, these things, are decision boxes. These are state boxes. We arrive at that state. And in this case, a decision box should have two, an input and an output. But we'll ignore the person that had designed these in the first instance, and they're that level of incompetence, and just follow this diagram. Strategic assessment. As I say, watch this carefully. Perform your strategic assessment. So you, as consultants to the companies that you're choosing for your assignment, look at it from that perspective. I'm going in to carry out a strategic assessment, specifically in the supply chain. Okay. Decision: do they need to form relationships or not? Evaluate what alternatives you have in terms of the relationships. Do you want to essentially the level of a relationship? How much do you just want to partner with a third-party logistics provider for transportation? Do you want to work with them to develop your customer base, develop new markets, for example? Why would you use a third-party logistics provider to help you develop a new market? They may already exist. They may already be serving other geographical markets. Therefore, you have a channel to that market. So straight away, now you have your marketing strategy coming in. We have an alternative strategy. If we partner with these guys, here we can enter that particular geographic market, a new opportunity potentially for the company. Within the organization, it could be seen as a strength on the partnership, for example. Okay. So the potential partners' capabilities, are they just transportation, or can they take on the whole lot for you? Can they source your suppliers? Can they find new markets? I mean, and you say, well, why would you do that? Of course. I mean, if they have the capabilities, your core competencies. This is the whole point of having a business, is that you develop your core competencies. Do what you're good at. Don't be delving into areas that you're not knowledgeable about, or you don't have the skills or the competencies or expertise. You could argue we could build these over time, absolutely, but is it in the best interest of the strategic objectives of the company to start investing in non-core competencies? And just because you don't have a powerful marketing department that you had to outsource and so on, doesn't make it any lesser of a company, or that you don't have a good training department or HR department or any of these, because most of it is outsourced, doesn't make it any weaker. You're actually saving money. That's the whole point about it, is reduce your cost, and you bring it all the ways down to the unit cost or the man-hour cost if you're delivering services. That's fundamentally what you're trying to drive at, driving your costs down. If you can get it done cheaper at a quality level, I'm getting pretty bored. Bored is the wrong word. I'd say pissed off. I'll call it as I see it. Of the reluctance to want to use the word cheap, because people say, oh, inferior quality and all that. It's not. It's less costly. It's less expensive. It's cheap. But remember, cheapness doesn't come at the cost of quality. It's expected that you will have the quality inherent. So being old school, I will stick to old school words and the true meanings of them, not the perceived meanings of them. So in any ways, capabilities, potential partners in terms of third-party, four-party logistics, other companies, competitors, what can you share and so on. So then the company needs and priorities, again, building on what your core competencies are, what do we need. So you have to identify the gaps, the skills gaps, the competency gaps. You need to know what you don't know. Okay. I think of a reference to this lady before, Carla O'Dell, great book of hers, If We Only Knew What They Already Know. But the corollary of that is, if we only knew what we don't already know. You might say, Jesus, Mark, you're talking riddles. Absolutely not. You need to know what you're good at, and by default, you know what you're not so good at. Then you take corrective actions. You either develop or outsource or contract, whatever. Then, of course, you go on and you select your partners. Straight after that, then the real fun begins. Structure the operating model. How are we going to work with these partners? What are the criteria? Now, straight up comes service level agreements. That's only part of it. You'll have all sorts of other agreements that you how do you structure your often the perception is service level agreements is just for suppliers and so on, but it could also be in terms of delivering to the customer. Any one of the criteria, what's important in terms of the capabilities that you've married up to with a selected partners. What are you asking them to do? And from there you define your KPIs. Delivery, quality of delivery, speed of delivery, timely delivery into operations, and so on, so on, so on. So you have to look at what are the key operational KPIs, and then go and implement them. Put the process in action. Therefore, you're measuring criteria all along from different perspectives and different processes and so on, and you build in this inherent implementation of continuous improvement. So this is how we've operated the model for the last 3 months. Let's look at fine tuning, and that's what it's all about: micro improvements. A little bit here, a little bit there. That's why I like BMW's efficient dynamics concept. A little bit here, a little bit there, and so on, all contributing to the overall reduction of what carbon emissions or whatever they want to look at, power to weight ratios, as a result, improving carbon emissions and all that, or reducing it. But fundamentally, running down costs. Why? Because they need to generate profit.
Sorry, Mark, just on that diagram below there, should there be not an arrow then going either from 6 to 5 or 6 to 1, where you're going back over to?
Absolutely, well spotted. Yes,
linear. Yeah.
yes. Technically, yes, you could go back that far, and
But you definitely need to
Right.
put 5 anyway, I suppose.
yeah. For
I suppose anywhere along the way there should be a review procedure, which doesn't seem to be at any point. So even at point 4, when you select your partners, you should be nearly reviewing what your decision was in the first place to form the relationship.
yeah,
Where you got the right. So there is no review process anywhere along the way.
Yeah.
exactly. And what would you, if you were to modify it, what would you call it? 10% going for this answer.
Well, it's reviewing your work practices and,
do check act.
you know,
I'm looking for a specific.
it's really your
Iterative.
decision tree, is it?
As I'm looking for a specific 2-word descriptor that we talked about before for a handy 10%.
Well, it's an iterative process, right? It's in.
Well, that's continuous improvement. Yeah.
Realignment.
No. I'll take no. We have that. I'll take 2 options. There's 2 options, or 2 naming options.
Competitive advantage.
No, it will lead to that. This would lead to this, but there's the elements that are missing. There's I talked about it before. About lecture 2 or 3, I think it was. We're going out of time, are we?
No, hold on. Give us another few minutes.
Anyone looking for 10%?
Is it something to do with a bike?
Yeah. Efficient dynamics. Efficient dynamics.
In relation to the bike,
Sustainability.
depending on what way your mind operates, but yes.
Is it business model canvas?
No,
Sustainability.
no.
There's another clue. Just for the crack. Go on. It's a bit of fun.
I can't think back on when I was talking about specifically about processes. Input, transform, output. Yeah.
Metrics review.
Yeah.
Feedback loop.
Who was saying that? Rebecca, is it?
Yeah.
Spot on. That's it. That was the first chance.
Thanks.
Hang on a second, Rebecca. Just take down your. I see these yellow boxes flashing up.
Rebecca
so-
is spelled BREN.
Now, do you see the sense of what I'm saying about
Yeah.
feedback loops? The
Mark, is there 5% for me for raising the question in the first place?
I should be deducting 5% for myself for not including that part of it. But yes, feedback loop, and what the concept that I was actually alluding to was systems thinking. Okay, and try and take this away with you all the time. Always think of systems. There's, the best way of looking at it, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So how do you know that? Because you look at it as from a system. There's a feedback loop and systems thinking. It's a fascinating area of study and all of that sort of stuff, but ignoring all the academics and stuff about that. Everything is a system. Our bodies are systems. The world we live in is a system. The companies we work in are systems. So there has to be. How else do you know if things are performing or not? It's that feedback. And that's why I said you'd strip it all down to simple 3-block diagram: input, transform, and output, and feedback. And you can feedback into transformation, the process itself, or feedback into the input. Say, based on the output, we need better quality raw materials coming in, and so on. So feedback, everything is a system, and that's really important in terms of how we interpret and understand all of these. And that's why it's a bit disappointing when you see those kind of literature coming up with this stuff. And I left it in there for that's these mistakes in there, because it just shows that not everything inside in books is perfect. So anyway, we'll just quickly step through these points to say, carry out, so do an audit, do an evaluation, an assessment, or an analysis of your logistics. In this case, step 1, and then step 2, decide to form. If you make a decision, are we going to have relationships? What are the benefits to us or not? Okay, more often than not, you will find some benefits. And then you have to stand back and say, well, let's do an activity cost analysis on this. How much time and effort are we going to put into this relationship? Is it going to be worth their while? Okay, so everything comes down to the holy euro, and then evaluate the alternatives. Again, part of the advice on this one is, if you have too many alternatives, you'll waste time. That's why I strongly recommend, in reality, not just in your assignments, when you're doing any kind of a SWOT analysis or equivalent, you might not call them SWOTs in companies, don't be coming up with lists as long as your arm. It's just not practicable. It's a waste of time. It might look impressive, but all it says is that really you don't have, you're throwing all of this stuff into the 4 boxes of a SWOT, and it's straight away saying that you're not a clear thinker. You're throwing too much stuff inside here. You can't prioritize, and so on and so on. So always pull back. And from an academic perspective, I always say to students, no more than 6 maximum, but keep it around 4 or 5 maximum points under each of the 4 boxes of a SWOT and of your SWOT. And the simple reason is that when you think about it, you've already analyzed and processed the options down to what you think are really, as I say, good options. Let's just say higher priority. But also, when you're thinking of these things, look at them and say, well, are these points actionable? Can we actually do something about it? There's no point in talking about opportunities, or a threat. COVID-20 could happen in 2 years' time, and we're back to square one. I mean, it's a wild guess. The probabilities and so on and so forth are 50-50. We don't know. But is there anything you can do about it? No. Why throw it in there? But if you can look at your strengths and weaknesses, as I say, the most important criteria: can we do something about it? Are they actionable? And then you do the further analysis on those points and say, from a time cost perspective as well, and the impact in achieving your original strategic objectives. Now remember, just because you would have had written a strategy in day one, the bloody things change. It's like any plan. The real fun is in the doing of the plan. You won't stick to it. Same with strategies. They change. That's why Mintzberg's theory on strategy is far, far more applicable and practical and sensible, because he talks about emergent strategy. Things change, and we have to, and the whole point and premise of emergent strategy is companies' responsiveness. That's why I link it back into your 4 cornerstones of competitive advantage, and that's responsiveness. How quickly and flexibly you can react to changes in the environment externally, because it's not what you can influence or change or do about the environment, it's how quickly you respond to it. That's why I focus so much, or suggest you should focus so much in your respective organizations today, not just for the assignment, on stuff that you can control and can do more effectively. The strengths and weaknesses. You have to be aware of the opportunities and threats and try to exploit them and all that sort of stuff. But it's how quickly you. So, for example, there might be an opportunity of a new market. You look at your own strengths internally. How good is our relationship? How good is our competencies today to actually take advantage of that opportunity in a new market, for example, or switch to a different supplier, and so on, so on. So evaluate.
That's why outsourcing is becoming more popular, Mark, because people want that, ability to just pivot as soon as they can,
Absolutely, absolutely, because because it's for the most part they can see that, look, there are others that can do stuff better than us. I mean, if it take outsourcing of manufacturing, the traditional thing, go to China, export or get all the manufacturing done there, or Eastern Europe. Why? Because it's more cost effective, generally speaking. So the trade-offs between that and your supply chain still means you can get the stuff into your local markets and still make substantial profit. That's why why company now. If you look at what's this website? Is it Doing Business in China? I think is the name of the website. I think it's something like that. But if you have a product that you want manufactured, you can go onto that website and they'll give you thousands of companies that could manufacture it for you. Thousands of companies. I mean, we really have to get our heads around the size of that place and the 1.5 billion people that are over there and the number of industries. They don't, is it Alibaba or AliExpress, one or the other. One of those companies, I think, you can't buy send me over a dozen of those. They send over thousands of things, items and samples and so on, and we find that hard to get our heads around that, to be honest with you, the magnitude and the volumes that they can operate, and that's why we outsource. But the important thing, again, as part of the process, you need to have somebody there. You need to build up a partnership with the company. You need to build up an understanding. The rest of all this stuff is outside my scope, but outside this module, but building up relationships, cultures, and so on, so on, so on. And you can chop and change at the drop of a hat. You can find replacements. It's very, very quickly. So evaluating these alternatives, thorough assessment of the company's needs and priorities, due diligence, for example, is you're going to try and assess anything you can find out, and this is where your research methods and so on comes into play. You haven't done a module on research methodology, no? Yeah. Okay, so you get an understanding of how much you can use that theory that you've learned to carry out this sort of stuff. Your usual desk research and so on, but you need to roll up your sleeves and find out as much as you can about your partners. I mean, Eddie Stober, and I hope there's nobody working for Eddie Stober, but I mean, he swooped in. Seagull strategy. You know what the seagulls do? Don't walk down Dunleary Strand or pier with an ice cream in your hand. The seagulls swoop in and take the bloody thing out of your hand. Same approach. Swooped in and started cleaning up in supply chain. Where is he today?
He got the Tesco contract. That's how he came into the country. He was
Yeah.
in the back, but then he lost it. That's
Yeah.
DHL have it now.
Yeah, but because Tesco being who they are, and all the other companies here say, well, if it's good enough for Tesco, it must be good enough for us, and so on. And he started to negotiate. An awful lot of the companies had to go back cap in hand to their original supply chain companies.
He undercut everybody because Tesco were covering the basics.
Yeah.
Because he was covering the country for Tesco. He could
Yeah.
undercut everybody else and
Yeah,
then
and
the trucks. Yeah.
and then his model was that because he was covering such a network, he was able to part share and share loads and consolidate his loads, the trailers loads of product and so on. So he was optimizing it, which was good. It was fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It was a business. It worked for a while, and it worked extremely well for him. But from a company, we say a manufacturing company down in Mayo that would have jumped onto the Stobart bandwagon, lorry wagon, a lot of them had to go back, tail between the legs, and to the local lads that they were using. Excuse me. Well, that's not being disingenuous to them, to the previous partners that they worked with.
Mark, there's nothing wrong with that either. As in,
No,
maybe sensing by your tone there that they go back with their tail between their legs, but like it's
Nothing
just
wrong at
business.
all.
It's not personal. As in, you go with any
Yeah,
sport in that
but
thing.
Exactly. Now, had companies done their due diligence, would they have made that same decision? That's the point I'm making, and in this context, evaluating the alternatives. You could be dazzled by the size and the presence. I mean, and Stobart exploited that exceptionally well. Those lorries were immaculate on the road, always were. It was a directive to the lorry drivers: keep these things clean. Wash them as much as you have to, and keep, because it conveys quality. If he's looking after his equipment like this, then he's looking after our products and so on, for example. And then of course the cost per the unit cost per kilo and so on, he was undercutting those, right? Because he was in many cases, as you said, Tesco, for example, were in some ways subsidizing that, so that he was able to translate that into other industries or for other companies. But if you're standing from a company, I know I use that expression, tail between the legs, cap in hand, whatever you want to call it, having to go back, but it put the companies in a vulnerable position, because they will say, well, had you left us for Eddie Stobart, now you're coming back again, so you could have ended up facing a higher price or more cost, so those negotiations could have been difficult, let's just say. So
Just on Stobart there, did Stobart not get the contract with Tesco because he undercut everyone else's prices? He was not paying staff properly. There was huge employment law issues there with Stobart's, which allowed him to undercut costs, and people didn't know about it until it was too late. He also had a raft of major accidents on the road where drivers weren't competent enough to drive trucks. So he didn't get in because of his business sense. He got in because of his underhandedness of the road, which ultimately failed then in the end.
They were all, in hindsight, yes, all of these became, uncovered. But at the time, and I remember, because I've been teaching this module or this subject for a few years now, and I remember at the time looking at this, I said, this is growing to fail. Literally growing to fail, because you could see, I said, this is happening way too fast. There's something not right about all of this. And then at the time, and I didn't know, I wasn't working in the industry, therefore I didn't have access to some of the nuances and things that were going on. But and the sense I was getting from some of the clients was that oops, I think we might have made a mistake here. And it all as I say, it all came out in the wash. And he was hugely, if you looked at his balance sheets, for example, they were hugely debt leveraged. I mean, literally, the company was run on borrowings. I mean, it was a disaster waiting to happen. That's why, again, when you look at the whole lot and your assessments and your due diligence, you're looking at the company's accounts, you're looking at all this, you look at their gearing ratios and all of this. Excuse the pun, gearing ratios, transportation, but your financial gearing ratio. You look at all these things to try and get a feel for the company. And that's why we carry out that evaluation of the alternatives is so critical, that you do your homework. And they might be brilliant at transport. They might have fantastic IT technology, IT resources to track and trace and cut back on lead times and all this sort of stuff. But are they highly debt leverage, therefore are they going to be around? Are they profitable? What way are they operating, and so on? So you have to look at all of these. Who are their customers? Who are their references sites, and so on. So it's really critical that you do a proper evaluation, and don't jump at the first set of baubles that look attractive, so to speak. It's no. This is where I'm going to have a pop at Neffet, and 3 or 4 weeks ago, Neffet would not do a thing without, we need to have the data, we need to have the data. A week ago, they jumped and they didn't have the data. Oh, someone else is doing it, we'll jump, and so on. It's exactly that type of situation. So do the numbers, go into the detail, make decisions based on the data and the facts. And that's why that evaluation. Otherwise, you will get stung. It's like making a bad hire inside and work. You might someone can sell you themselves at an interview. Boom, great job, happy days, and 2 months, a month, 6 months down the road, they're really not up to it. So you have to start the whole process over again. That's why, for example, outsourcing HR has become so popular, but not for trend or fad. It's because it's become so complicated and complex in terms of the processes, the psychometric testing, the experts they use, the types of tests they're using, and so on, to make sure they get the right hire into the organization, because it's so costly to go through the process. They want to get it right as much as possible. That's why they put the effort into that sort of outsourcing. And again, this is why I was leading on to this whole point. Core competency assessment is the key relationship decision that involves an external provider of logistics. So look at what they're good at. So you have your own core competencies, and I'll tell you straight up, companies only have about 6-8 core competencies at best. Some people say, "Oh, we have a lot of other competencies." No, you don't. You have competencies, you have skills, and so on. But are they core to your organization? You need to understand what are the core competencies. What are you good at in terms of your own organization relative to the industry or other competitors, and so on. That's what HR people will recognize these things when you do your gap analysis, skills gap analysis, and you try to assess all the skills inside an organization. I did it 20 odd years ago in one company. 250 odd skills, competencies. It was a competency profile. 250. There is no way are you going to use all 250. Nice to know about, but let's analyze it down, and you fine tune it, and say, well, what as a company, as a collective, even part of a group of a team or group of individuals have common competencies. These are the competencies that we actually use in our products and actually deliver on our services. They're the core competencies. The rest are other competencies and skills and so on. And when we did that, in this particular case, we identified 7 core competencies of in the company. There were other skills. There was guys doing video analysis and video encoding down in UL part-time on their own. There were guys that spoke German, interestingly. Now you say, well, what's the big deal with this? We were going into the German market, and 3 of those were the guys that were in the test function, and whom I asked to go and help with the tendering process and the actual physical demo in Austria. And these guys were able to listen to what our German competitors were saying and drip feed it back. Was that a core competency? No, it was a competency. Our core competency was how quickly we were able to analyze and recode in C programming language. Okay, so understanding those core, and similarly, you need to look at those companies. Well, what are they really good at? They do all these other things. They have lovely websites, this, that, and the other thing. But how good are they behind all of this? What's key? Delivery times, quality, so on, so on. So you identify, and then are those core competencies, even though they're in a different, should we say, industry or a different business, the way they develop those core competencies, are they mirroring how you developed your core competencies. Are they at the same level? So we're really getting analytical now at this stage when we're looking at how do they develop? Do they, how well do they use their core competencies? Can you find that out? Of course you can, by talking to the company and getting, knowing that they're particularly good at, let's say, a fourth party logistics service provider are very good at identifying marketing new markets or marketing trends and or market trends in specific products in specific areas and so on. So you go to them. Who's the company that analysts? Not Grant Thornton, not that sure. It begins with G. I can't remember. But they're industry analysts, and they only work in IT and technology, and that's where their core competency. They wouldn't go into other companies or into other industry areas. So again, you look at these, and that's where you develop your strategic fit. They're at this level. They can complement. They're not too big for us or not too small for us. They may be a very large company. They may have a very long history and so on, and they now might be a potential partner for you. But do they fit with your strategy? And that's where you might end up having to alter some of your strategy to if you decide to go down on a partnership route. So you already have your predefined strategy. You're now looking at partners. You're assessing if possible alternatives. You're getting to know about these potential partners in terms of their competencies and benefits to you, and therefore the strategic fit, not that they fit your strategy, but maybe there's additional strategy that we could or we could scope the strategy as a joint venture slightly differently, or you might be seeing the possibility of changing or modifying your strategy based on having this partnership in existence and so on. So the strategic fit, you're in the ballpark, but it doesn't have to be precise, tailor-made. It can emerge. Stuff can emerge as you're going through the process. Remember, fundamentally, it's a process. Things change, and we need to be able to evaluate. And then there, the last part, of course, is the ability to invest. And I've talked about this just now in the context of carrying out your due diligence. Are they capable? Will they be in business? How long they've been in business? Who are their clientele? Who are their existing customers, and so on? What's their R&D investment? If you're outsourcing, generally it's because they have skill sets that in technologies that complement or can replace some of your technologies. And are these guys really in touch with what's happening and how quickly they're going? How much is their R&D spend? And you'll find that all, particularly for publicly quoted companies. Excuse me. Particularly for publicly quoted companies, you'll find out all this information from their accounts, and you extrapolate out. So the drivers, the compelling reasons and facilitators are identified. So, asset cost efficiencies and customer service, market advantage, things I've already spoken about this morning. And then facilitators, supportive corporate environment, factors that enhance partnership growth and development. So again, sometimes you could be approaching the potential partners and with a possibility that they might not have realized, and therefore you can facilitate something for them. For example, maybe your products are already in a particular market, but you want to grow that market in a particular geographic region. They don't exist in there, but they might be in the neighboring geographic region. Say, well, we can get you in here, but we know that you have a better distribution network, and you can map that into this geographic location, and we can cut back on our existing blah, 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 and so on. So it could be a potential for them to expand their networks and create new distributions. And look at the Amazons, for heaven's sake, how they're operating. And well, that's not a great example, just because they're building up the road. Fabulous building. Anyway, so neither drivers nor facilitators present more transaction or arm's length. And then common drivers with facilitator factors provide more structure. So again, it's like, if in more simpler terms, it's like having a win-win situation. Just before I go on to the next point, I just there's something coming up in chat. I need to open this thing up and see what's what? the roll call. Hope it's not okay. Oh yeah, no, not Gavin. Right, we're on. We'll go halfway through, and then we'll take a quick coffee break if that's okay. Right. So again, step 4, selecting the partners. Okay, so, logistics or supply chain partners often are very close consideration of the credentials we mentioned already. Ensure that everyone involved has a consistent understanding of the decisions being made and so on. So even in this process, your evaluating team, when you're selecting the partners, it isn't the vice president of supply chain management or the managing director or the director of supply chain management. It's the team should be representative of all the functions in your organization: finance, HR, marketing, operations, R&D, IT, definitely IT. You need cross-functional teams because what might be important to one function, such as operations, might be not important to HR or marketing. IT might have some serious concerns because of the types of systems that are being used, but you as operations manager, it's low on your priority list. That's why developing the cross-functional team is so important when you're looking at these elements of potential partnerships, because there will be issues. Does anyone here work with Cuisine de France? No? Are they down in Mount Mellick or around that neck of the wood? They have a facility. Anyway, they were changing legacy systems to SAP system. It was a few years back, several years back, and things went horrendously wrong. They hired in consultants, and the consultants, as you have with SAP consultants, half of them don't know their from their elbow, a hand from their elbow, and they don't. And that's why SAP took back a lot of the consultancy outsourcing and so on, because there was a lot of cowboys out there. Anyway, one reputable company who proffered SAP consultancy to Cuisine de France made a horse's ass of it. And the biggest problem you make in IT projects, these guys went for the big bang switch over. And over a weekend, things started to go wrong. They end up having to call in their own IT people, the Cuisine de France, their own IT department, to try and untangle some of the mess. But it meant they had to close down production for a while, several days, as far as I remember. But word got out. Competitors said, "Geez, you're not going to be able to get the Cuisine stuff. Their systems are gone cock a hoop. They're not going to be able to produce anything." But I have some stock here. But competitors took every sort of advantage to try and bury them. All because they couldn't plan and implement a proper project management system to swap over. And now swap over, I don't mean big bang. No one goes big bang anymore. Jesus, that's extremely risky. So you run systems in parallel. But that's the kind of thing, having the right cross-functional teams in place and the right people involved on those teams to carry out your selection process, because you have to prioritize. This is the next level down from your strengths and weaknesses, how you use your risk analysis, risk assessment. Well, that's what they're calling it nowadays, risk assessments and all that sort of stuff. But basically, it's your due diligence. Cover all the bases. Look at all the possibilities. What can happen. Scenario testing, for all intents and purposes, is more precise rather than risk assessment. Not to be disingenuous to any risk assessors. But that's basically what it is. Think of what possibly could go wrong and mitigate it as quickly as possible, if not eliminate it totally. And that's why you're having the right team together. And then structure the operate. How are we going to work? Plan, communicate. How are we going to talk to one another? What are the risk reward sharing? What's the basic going to be the contract, and how much do we have to invest? One of the best examples of this operating model and structure and selecting partners was the smart car. And down in Smartville, isn't that what they call the place, down in Hambach, down on the French-German border, where they manufacture the smart cars. They brought all their first tier and some of their second tier suppliers to co-locate. And now that was a massive risk for all concerned. do we want to go into this? But they did their homework. Everyone, they sat down and they put the operating model was exceptional. Cars are made, and as soon as cars go literally out the back door onto the transporters to be sold or onto the distribution line, the minute they go out the back door, that's when the suppliers get paid. But their manufacturing time is only a matter of hours. I think it was 6 or 7 hours from start right through to finish. Maybe less actually. It's less, I think. In any case, all of this would have taken place. How it's an exceptional example of how to put a good structure and operating model and have all of the tick all the boxes: communication, co-location, the sharing of information. These guys from the different companies meet once a week to discuss any of the issues or problems that might have happened, or any foreseeable problems that they might see in the supply chain itself, let alone their production facilities. And if they're improving any process in the actual production facility, how that can have a change on their supply chain. We need to get more product in here because we can start to move things faster and so on. And then because even their systems, I mean, the doors and panels are made in one, and you can actually see them going across on one of these sky lifts and walkways or overhanging thing. You can see the components coming down into the central manufacturing place where they marry all the bits together in the final assembly. So implementation, continuous improvement, which I just described, these guys do it through communications, weekly meetings in their case, but depending on the complexity of the new relationship, the overall implementation process may be relatively short, or it may be extended over a longer period of time. So again, when you're setting up the partnership, as a partnership, you agree on what's important, what are the KPIs you want to measure, and then say, well, which ones, and for heaven's sake, don't be going for the low hanging fruit always. That's just disguising it. Now, professionally, I don't have any major issue with that. I would say that mix it. You need to have some win-win situations or some low-hanging fruit at the start-ish of your collaboration to show some momentum and bring people along and bring the partnership along. So have a couple of nice, easy scores are always good to have. But be cognizant that there are more difficult challenges down the road. So try and mix them and pull them back. Only once in my career where I turned the table on its head, and I actually went for all the difficult stuff first, and I had my overall project managers, my overlords in Denmark at the time, chase me down. Mark, you're behind schedule, everyone else, all the other subsidiaries are way ahead. And I said, I'm doing all the difficult stuff first. And true to form, within 2.5 months of the project, which was about 6 months project, the other subsidiaries started to slow down, and my guys and my team, we had easy days for the last, pretty much, we were actually twiddling our thumbs for the last 1.5 months of the project because we'd gotten the rough stuff over first. But when I analysed reflective practice, when I went back and thought about it, it was a little bit unfair to the other projects. And the reason why was that I was drawing attention to our team and the concerns of the overall project manager, and I needed him to trust us a bit more, and eventually he did, but when he saw things begin to move, and when he saw that there was a crossover, my performance was going down, and in the initial days, theirs were all on the up, theirs are on the way up and killing it up, but when we got close to the intersection where they were beginning to slow down and we were passing them out, I never got phone calls or messages or emails from the guy at all, because he knew what was after happening. But that's, again, the continuous improvement, carefully picking some low-hanging fruit, but the more difficult things that you're going to have to address in the partnership, whatever they are.
I'd have to agree with you there, Mark, because if you address all the low-hanging fruit too early, and then you want to implement, let's say, transformational technologies later, you're after doing away with your business case by taking away, I suppose, what you would have been demonstrating by introducing the transformational technology and now the business may not want to do that because it's not making them enough money to do that. But it's
Yeah.
probably in their better interest to to do it, but they just can't see the figure on paper
Mm.
anymore because you're after making it too easy for them to say no.
Exactly, and the motivation starts to go down because you see all you begin to see are more difficult challenges, and people you'll start to lose people. That's why leadership is so critical in this, and the joint leadership in these partnerships are so critical that the over if it's a 2 year partnership, 5 year partnership, that you pace stuff and you keep the partnership alive and positive. So again, it's it's a whole mixture of having the right teams, having the right measurable points, the easy picks at the start just to get some momentum going, and then knowing how to push the partnership each as you're going along to keep the interest, keep the stretching the points, and that's down to the leadership as well. And the stamina of the leaders. I mean, that's a whole other subject matter. We do this in semester 1 with a different team. We have a diploma in leadership, and we go into seriously advanced methodologies and so on there on developing leaders and organizations. But that's where it comes in. And as you're right, Paul, it's in the business case, having the not just the finances, but what are the objectives and how can we achieve these objectives, and ticking off the milestones and achieving and communicating all this back into to show that the partnership is alive and functioning. Yeah. So then, if we look at here, step 6, implementing the continuous improvement. So sorry, what?
Sorry, Mark. I just wanted to ask before you move on. Thanks, Colin.
I didn't see that.
No, you're okay. I just want to ask there. Can you just give an example, because I get the concept here. This is all very new to me. Obviously, I get the concept. I understand it, but I need specific examples. And Paul kind of discussed there. He spoke about the project, the example there for transformational change. But can you just give specific examples of what that was in the project? And I don't mean to slow you up or anything, but it's just, this makes sense, but I suppose I need to have specific examples for me to actually relate it to to real world stuff, because this is something I haven't been exposed to before, because otherwise it's just a framework that I'm probably never going to really get into if I don't have an example. And I don't know how other people feel on that.
The first one that comes to mind would be Sony Ericsson in terms of a partnership. And if you look at what you stand back and look at Sony Ericsson, what did they even have in common? And where did such a strategic partnership, where did it come? So essentially, Ericsson were communications technology as an industry was changing. There were new drivers. It wasn't just a simple case of texting and phoning anymore. People were getting apps for this, and it was evolving from SMS and mobile messaging and sending picture texts and all that sort of stuff. So we could see that this was moving into more of an entertainment device rather than just a mobile phone. And that's where Sony, for all intents and purposes, they had great entertainment products. I mean, movies, music, and so on, and gaming platforms. So Ericsson and Sony said, well, okay, as a joint venture, so to speak, Ericsson said, well, we won't get into this app and all this sort of stuff. We'll just focus on developing the core product, telephones and data transmission. It was gone beyond just simple voice and text. Let's start to build phones that can handle data and data transmission and so on, and build telephone exchanges, and then say, well, how are we going to make money out of all of this? So in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, they started to develop new charging systems, and the operators like Telecom Éireann at the time said, how are we going to make money? Ask Paul Reed. He worked for them for a while. How are we going to make money out of this? So they had to develop whole new ways of charging customers for all this. So that's how that was a classic example. Mercedes and was it Chrysler
But Mark, can I just ask, in relation to the structure, like the structure operating model, how did that change with Sony and Ericsson? So these were two companies that had different core competencies.
Yeah.
They came together, but what was that 0.5 there in the framework? Did they co-locate? Did they, what was their structured operating model for them to work as a partnership?
They formed a new entity, essentially a new company,
Okay.
an umbrella company called Sony Ericsson. Even though Ericsson had their own entities mostly up in Sweden, Ireland, still scattered, they had their core competencies for developing the actual technologies, transmission technologies, phone transmission technology. They got out of the phone business, essentially. Ericsson said, let's divest this. We'll just make some of the components for the phones. They were very good at making the transmission components of the phones, and let Sony build the bloody things. Build the things themselves. And more importantly, another advantage was that Sony's screen technology, which, by the way, was LG's screen technology. Most of those big manufacturers, LG have a phenomenal core competency in building and screen technology as such. So they leveraged off that. So they could see these as the strategy was, this whole telecoms business is moving into an entertainment business, and it has since moved on. It's now gone into more health oriented and health driven technology, and so you still, and of course you have all your apps. So that's how, as an operating duo model, that's how they structured their operating model themselves. So they put down the strategy, they stayed together. They only disbanded when was it, about 2 years ago, was it 3 years ago from memory? But again, they put all the risks together, they shared together. One that didn't take advantage of such a collaboration was Nokia. They were too slow to move. They didn't partner up, and as a consequence, to the Finns, they were extremely embarrassed over the failure of Nokia. But what it took a number of external consultants coming in and said, "Hey, hang on a second. Just because there's 40 or 50,000 of you now pretty much out of work, look at the core competencies." So their micro businesses, entrepreneurship, and so on and so forth took off at a phenomenal rate in Finland. But they saw their flagship company decimated because they didn't take advantage of and back the wrong technology as such, didn't partner up.
Partner with Microsoft.
Sorry?
Did Nokia not partner with Microsoft?
They did for a while, and that died. But and as you know, the
partnership, they were bought outright by Microsoft, and then Microsoft disposed of them.
Yeah, and even the Microsoft phone bit was a disaster. It didn't take off at all. And another company that was there around the same time would have been, do you remember the Palm Pilots and those which were Blackberries and all of that? I think they're still around as such. Their core competency was encryption, but they didn't partner up, on
a smaller scale, like I suppose, just in terms of manufacturing, like you partner with your vendors all the time to introduce new technologies that you just can't build as a manufacturer of what you manufacture. So in order to manufacture what you manufacture, you need their technologies to do that. So they actually will take a lot of the risk in building these new technologies for you. So but their reward sharing will be, I suppose, that you're going to buy 20 of them off them.
Yeah.
And the contract style, I suppose, would be that if they're successful, they get a contract maybe with you and your wider company. And they invest in the technology early with the assumption that you're going to buy it later.
Yeah.
That's the financial investment, I suppose.
Yeah, that certainly can be one way of looking at it. And then, of course, the shift in the different in customers' preferences and needs, desires, and some ways drive the technology can drive that. If you're producing more capable phones, then here's this great technology. Now let's see what you can do with it as such. So more and more app development. So the business models changed and changed dramatically.
Fireserve had or Fiserv had a really good collaboration as well, wasn't it? US Post and God, I can't remember the companies, but I remember going for an interview one time with them, and there was a huge collaboration of big multinationals that came together, shared their core competencies, and set up this big payment services juggernaut now.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm trying to remember the other. I think it was Chrysler and Mercedes-Benz. It was often referred to as the marriage of unequals. And I remember it was a case study on my own MBA years and years ago, a lifetime ago. And it simply came down to the egos of the two CEOs. The German CEO at the time didn't want to be taken over or be seen to be taken over by a foreign company because Mercedes was a national entity in Germany, and of course Chrysler wanted to be the first to take over a foreign company as such. So yeah, Chrysler-Benz, it wasn't a great collaboration as such, but it was literally down to egos, With all the due diligence and blah, blah, that went on in place, it came back to egos. So anyway, listen, folks, I'll just finish this part and we'll take a 5-minute coffee break and then wrap up on the last few elements, if that's okay with you guys. But again, customer value research, process mapping, that's the dovetailing of your processes. I was in one small company working going into a new market with our bigger partners, Nokia at the time, and one of the big issues was how our processes differed or mapped towards and had to be mapped into Nokia. And here was the criteria. We could only supply up to 1 million subscriber type system. After that, Nokia said, right, you better, once you start approaching 800, 900,000 subscribers, you want to be able to swap out and put in our system. That's the deal. So we had to, we were able to leverage off Nokia's brand and size to get into these new markets. Customers began to trust us as a consequence, and we were able to get some access into some of Nokia's technology and the way. So eventually, the small company, again, it was a Finnish company that I worked for at the time, we built our own systems where we were able to handle, multiples of millions of subscribers. But in the early days, they didn't want to have to be worried about the small nitty gritty stuff. They were big system operators. They wanted someone to come in and just kind of loosen up the ground for us, and they started digging the bigger hole, so to speak. And data analytics, what can you say? Yeah, show me the numbers. Do your cost analysis. So again, activity-based costing is the important one here. That's the only way you're going to get true numbers. And then benchmarking and intelligence, what you know about this company or the other companies. So finding out stuff, your research. So you can say, well, this is where we are, and you have your models for that as well. Where do you fit into the different amongst your competitors in a particular industry analysis. And then supply chain transformation. What do you need to do to change? What way are you going to actually change your whole supply chain, if at all? Are you going to outsource everything? Are you introducing new technologies? The sky's the limit. It depends on where you want to go. It depends on originally all the ways back to what were your original strategic objectives, and then what are the emerging objectives as a consequence of looking at and potentially partnering up with third-party logistics service providers or whomever. So I'm going to take a break there, folks. That's okay with you? What time is it now? Let's reconvene at 12:30. Okay. So as I say, imperatives for collaborative relationships. And again, without going through them all in detail, we've spoken about them. Clearly defined goals and objectives, trust and commitment within the partnership itself. organizational capabilities and communications. So knowing what you're good at and trusting your core competencies and communicating these over and back. Equitable sharing gains and losses, again, the clearly undefined sharing of the risk. That example, Sinead was asking about this example. Have a look at a Smart Car and the way they approach their operating model. It's the pinnacle and perfect example of this material that I'm presenting here this morning. I do have some stuff. There are a couple of videos around, but literally, if you go onto YouTube, you'll see some excellent videos on talking about their supply chain for the Smart Car, and it talks about this risk and how they were all sharing. So they went and co-located. All of these companies came together knowing that this was a potentially high-risk maneuver to co-locate and build premises and put the whole infrastructure in place. But it paid off. I mean, they obviously, and they're still in production today. And benefits to greater than going it alone, clearly. Dedication to continuous improvement. Absolutely. Where can we shave off a little bit here, improve that process, improve this process, and consequently save money. Drive down our actual production costs over the whole supply chain. One of the interesting aspects of the supply chain partner was their distribution and retail sides of things, and one of their outlets was in Paris, and from memory it was close to or just off Champs-Élysées. Now you think Grafton Street is expensive. Champs-Élysées for retail estate is extremely expensive. So what did the smart guys do? Rather than buying your usual car showroom and have your cars like, I don't know, BMW, Mercedes, Frankine and big premises here, they built a tower. And you can have, I think it was 7 or 12 cars in the tower, a simple lift, and you sat down, you chose your model of car, whatever, and this thing went up, picked it up and brought it back down again. So they went vertical rather than taking up space. A simple idea like that will just showed the brilliance of the thinking behind the collaboration on where they could save money and be more efficient and so on. And then, benefits greater than going it alone and dedicated to continuous, and then the strategic plan to provide direction and collaboration as to where they wanted to go. And all they looked at was, if you think of the Smart Car example again, what were their core competencies? Who were they? Swiss Mercedes Art. That's what the Smart stood for. Or Swatch Mercedes Art. Swatch as in the manufacturers. What were they? Their competency was they saw a threat from Japanese imports at the time of LED and LCD watches, and the Swiss being in the traditional analog watches. They said we need to get up with the times and develop something that's cheap and cheery and can change. As a fashion item, you could change the face or the things. You know the story with the swatches and how they've evolved over time. Because in my operations module, there's a very good diagram to show how they invested and continue to invest and so on and so forth, and grow their business because of profitability and so on. So they decided, can we do the same with a car? And Mercedes were interested. Yeah, that's an interesting proposition. Could we, take the watch industry and how that transformed itself and do something with a car? Could we provide some? So they put together their two core competencies, car manufacturer and watch manufacturer, put it together, looked at the way, and that's why you can go in, and I think it takes 3 hours and you can completely change the body of your Smart Car, put on new panels, and even if you get a bad dent or scratch in one of them, you just take off a panel in less than an hour and replace it and change the color of the thing and so on, so on, so on. And that was, so these were that was the strategic plan and the collaboration. That's why they came together, pulled their core competencies, and then developed a whole new and focused on a particular niche in the market.
I still wouldn't be saying dead in one.
Well, I would have said the same myself, but the two-seater sports coupe thingy, even Jeremy Clarkson said it great fun to drive and so on. But if you're running around inside in European cities and you're looking at congestion charges and parking fees and so on and so forth, you'd think twice about having one, and that's why they were bought as a second car for the city driver as such and so on. It was two people and a crate of beer. That was how.
Then again, they have functioning transport systems.
Exactly. Now you wouldn't take one from
Sorry,
Selbridge.
You're not gonna convince me, Mark. Moving swiftly on.
I know. As I say, you wouldn't sit in one and drive from Selbridge to Galway to go to the beach for the afternoon. I can guarantee you that. But it served a particular niche as such, and they were selling quite. The partnership started to fail, and it did fail when they were on the American market. They wanted to go green and have some kind of electric, and Mercedes weren't too happy about that, as from memory. Anyway, that's it. But it's an excellent example covering the material that we're talking about here this morning. So again, the benefits and the barriers. Focus on the core competencies. I'm not going to repeat myself again on it. Knowledge sharing is important, and that's why the trust and commitment and communication becomes important. None of this thing of protecting and shielding stuff if you don't share it. A principle I've lived by and worked by: knowledge is power. Sharing it is even more powerful. Speaks for itself. Sometimes you know stuff, and that's why I have a great disdain for different types of managers, and one of them being the magpie manager. Give him the information and he hoards it away and doesn't share it, and then how great his idea was 6 weeks or 6 months later. Anyway, seagull managers, same thing. Bad. There's a whole list of them that are not written about in textbooks. Teflon manager, blah. So creating competitive advantage over competing supply chains. And that's where you're looking at the totality of the supply chain. What can we do? How there are channels of distribution, our channels to customers and so on. Where can we fine tune these? Can we increase our channels? And how can we make our products more available to different customers in different locations? And that might be simply, is it do we web enable? No, if you're not web enabled today, you're pretty much behind the curve. But what does that mean for your business? Again, have you got the capabilities to meet the surge in demand, because you're now selling stuff online and you're opening up to a global market potentially? And if you notice how some of these constrictions are placed on Amazon, for example, some products that I would have looked for and said not available in your region. Look for another supplier and so on. So that's how, and it's not because they can't export, it's because they don't have the capabilities to meet the demands to serve all these other, or they may not have their supply chain in place to supply to different geographic regions, or to supply globally. And you'll find that generally speaking with American companies that they'll tell you, no, we don't supply into that region. And then more productive and satisfied. And on the downside, you get this, and the turf protection really is coming from here. Lack of managerial support and turf protection. It's usually at the middle to senior, more so the senior management levels inside an organizations. That's where all this stuff begins to sour the whole potential in terms of being a barrier. Middle managers, I say, because they generally speaking own the resources. Usually frontline manager, not as in what's been hijacked for this last year in terms of frontline, but direct managers. Department managers, they control and own the resources, and if you don't get their buy-in, they can slow things down or they can support things happening. So again, this is down to the internal politics inside an organization, and indeed the politics between the two different cultures of the different organizations themselves. Fundamentally, as I exemplified on the Chrysler Mercedes, it was the clash of egos. That's when you analysed all the data, all the logic behind the partnership, it came down to failing. That's why it was regarded as the marriage of unequals in terms of case studies and companies and so on and so forth. But that's look, the resistance to change, because people fear what's going to happen to me, where are my jobs going, where are we going to go, and that's the lack of communication. So these are real barriers that can happen and are pretty indicative. They're generic enough in no matter what's happening inside an organization. Even if you're introducing new IT systems in your organizations, much of these barriers will exist as well. Now compounded by joining with another company. The top tier levels of managers become worried. What's happening here? Do you need two CEOs, two CFOs and all that? Of course you don't. That's why, for example, we have in the TU application, technological university. These are the big issues here inside in that. I mean, a stroke of a pen could have changed the act to call us all technological universities instead of institutes of technology. But no, we created a whole complexity around it. And now you still have two entities. If you look at all the existing mergers that have taken place, the South, the TU in Dublin here and so on, that you still have the same layers of managers, same functions. There has been no optimization of the system as such. Even if you go into Waterford and Cork, a collaboration down below, the Munster TU and so on and so forth, you still have almost two separate websites. It's farcical. These are my employers. Anyway, moving swiftly on. It's the reality, unfortunately.
The irony is not lost.
Is this going on YouTube, Mark? It is.
Sorry?
Is it on YouTube?
It is.
The irony is not lost, Mark.
I know, and as I would say, it's I stand by my opinions. Look what happened to Gordon Elliott. I know, I'm joking.
Just checking your awareness. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, let's moving on. So they're the obstacle. Now this is just another a quick throwaway diagram on the types of collaborations, and go moving swiftly towards the end of it here. Where you have full collaboration between suppliers. And they're using third parties. Logistics suppliers, for example, co-transportation, shared loads, and all this sort of stuff, right through to the manufacturers. So you have, up in retail stores, Zara would be a good example of that, where in one region in the retail stores, B&Q, another good example, that they'll swap stuff around between stores. If customers are looking at a particular store, that they'll send product over and so on. Generally speaking, that's how they operate. So if one store is performing better than the other in terms of the same items, the lesser performing store will keep the stock going over and back, or keeping product, take it off their shelves, their stock, and send it over to keep keep customers happy. That's the end game. And of course they have fantastic IT systems in place, so they can locate products. If they're running short of one store, they can locate and suggest to customer, either you go over there, or we can have it here, and come in and collect it, and so on, and provide a click and collect background. And it's just phenomenal how some of these stores have cottoned on to not losing a sale. Okay. So third-party logistics industry, what do we have? We have the first party, the old traditional stuff, shippers and receivers. Second, asset-based logistics providers have physically moved the products through supply chain. Again, the lorry transportation companies themselves having their own companies, and or airlines even, and as was the case with Stobart. Then third-party firms that manage and or provide logistics services on behalf, and fourth party firms that provide broader scope of services to help manage elements of the supply chain, and typically many of them are strategically involved in the third party. And now we look at the fifth party logistics service providers, companies that aggregate demand of 3PLs into bulk volumes to negotiate better rates. So these are, it's just a layer, it's like a cooperative, but they're standalone specialists that can coordinate. Because if you look at any of those large ports and so on and how stuff is moved around, this is really down to the port management systems, the logistics systems, operation systems in place, and how these are hooked into the likes of these five PLs, Hapag-Lloyd and those higher level companies. I can't think of the other one's name, that in particular Taiwanese company. They're just exceptional at aggregating all of these loads and so on. But not only that, they'll also look at the markets. They'll help you with your customer management systems as well. They go above and beyond just well, implicit in the supply chain is customer management as well. So you're just left with making the stuff in your factory somewhere. They take care of all of the rest. And as you can see here, in terms of multiple third parties, these are the evolution over time. So going from insourcing right through to transportation management, value-added warehousing, logistics service, other logistics service, clearing, and of course the big one down here, even though it's the bottom of the line, IT. All of this, most of this, could not be happening unless there was unless you have a good IT systems inside it, and of course they are. They have. Is there anything in particular on this that take more risk, provide more advanced IT services, strategic consultancy? Yeah, but insofar as they might have better, deeper market knowledge, and that can feed back into you as a company, as a manufacturer. Control tower services. That's literally literally like your air traffic control tower. They can juggle multiple things all at the same time. So they have all the data, they have all the screen, they have all the connections into the different systems to be able to see what's happening in the skies at any one particular time. In this case, looking at their supply chains themselves.
Mark, how has COVID impacted that kind of thinking?
How has COVID? It's stretched a lot of these systems to breaking point, and a lot of it is well. It's impacted, and so manufacturers having to close down, lockdowns, and so on and so forth. So their products have become scarce. The supply of materials has impacted, overall, it has meant just longer and longer delays in getting product. Generally speaking, that said, I have been testing and watching the Chinese market. They have, if anything, speeded up their deliveries of products from China. I can't explain it. I don't know why, but they have actually improved their turnaround order times. They've shortened their order times. I don't know quite why, but all other products, you're looking in many cases next year before you're going to get products. Now, again, of course, I couldn't have a lecture without even mentioning a bike. Isn't that so? I know there's a few giggles and smiles in the background. And
pretty well to get this time.
I mentioned it.
You did. But it's interesting. There's hardly a bike to be had in this country until 2022. The supply chain. Yet, by looking at WhatsApp groups, I'm seeing that the supply to Malaysia, Taiwan, and Indonesia has not been affected. Primarily because most of these products are made in Taiwan, which is interesting. And actually, no, they're not. Tell a lie. A lot of them are made in China. Some of them are made in Taiwan. But the specific models, the Specialized, for example, they are made in China. And yet that geographic region doesn't appear to be suffering in lead times. I don't know why. Because the products are far more profitable in Europe and America than they would be in those locations.
95% of the Chinese airline industry is back flying.
Yeah.
So there's no problems with deliveries in that part of the world.
No, and again, they're relatively short haul as well,
Yeah.
comparatively speaking. So get it out there quickly and get money in, and they're doing that exceptionally successfully. But if you look at overall in China, they're rebuilding the Silk Road. They've invested billions, trillions on the Silk Road, and watch that space, coming, and the importance of that. It's been creeping up on us for years, but it's going to certainly open up more markets directly from China, directly out. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. Fair play to them. Okay, where am I going here? I'm nearly getting to the end of this. Okay, so third parties, transportation based, contract logistics based, and then freight forwarding. So these are just the additional services above and beyond the straightforward. So examples here, FedEx supply chain services, UPS, DHL, all the big names, Schneider Logistics, Penske in the States, and of course you could have Hapag-Lloyd and Norsk and a few more of these ones. Who's the other? I can't think of the other one. It's on the top of my tongue. Can't think of the other one here. Big European companies. Chiva, DSC, Excel, DHL, and again the usual from contract logistics, so outsourcing. So you hand over the whole lot to them, pretty much, and then the usual thing, freight forwarding. Who do you have here again? DHL coming up, a hub, and UTI worldwide. DHL, UPS would also fit into freight forwarding as well. I mean, they have all their own assets as well, so they'll take everything from door to door essentially. What else do we have? Financial based, information based, and then corporate subsidiary based types of. So now, taking all of those, they're specialist areas that some of these 3PLs. So you could have 2 or 3 3PLs that you're working with, but they're talking to each other. That's where this partnership model. So you might have an information-based 3PL looking at markets, providing merge results for growth and development of internet-based and business-to-business, looking at new market opportunities or new potential customers. You might have that 3PL as an outsourced partner, and you might have someone else then in transportation and management, and who also do a bit of freight forwarding. So let's just take 2 3PLs. So you could be working. Those 2 are talking to one another in the first instance anyway. It just adds a little bit more complexity. Now we move into the 4PLs. They would have elements of all of this. So you're dealing with one entity, in terms of 4PLs. These are just some numbers, and they're almost out of date, but those growth rates would have been increasing by 2 or 3% above and beyond those figures up to last year. Obviously, they would have slowed down for notable reasons. Yeah.
Sorry, what's the CARG? Is that the compound average growth rate?
No. Yeah, in that diagram it is. Yeah, it is in that diagram.
Sorry, go on.
No, go. You're going to ask?
So you're saying, let's say for North America, it's a 4.3% increase year on year.
Yeah, and had been continuing in that rate, and mostly on road transportation. The vast majority of that, plus the Mississippi was also contributing phenomenally to growth rate as well. The barges, ships, and so on and so forth on the Mississippi, interestingly enough, have a huge portion of transportation in there, and then it's all interstate transportation, lorries. And in this case, we were looking at around 2018 in the States, and it would be kind of similar to European figures, in around the same types of numbers in terms of billions. So you're hitting close on $200 billion of third-party logistics activities and product being shipped around. And again, the logistics outsourcing activities, so domestic transportation, warehousing, and it just breaks it all the way down to other services. So 4PLs at 7%, but you can see services within other range from that. So 7% of 4PLs, but that is growing, again, because of the technology is driving that for the most part.
I saw a stat there that the global market in 2019 was 950 billion globally for third-party logistics.
Oh yeah, that would make sense, but it would be interesting to try and get the value of that in 12 months' time. And the reason I'm saying that is, what happens when we all come out of lockdown? What's actually going to happen? All the monies that you have saved by not having to travel and so on and so forth, are you going to all splash out, and that creates demand, and will that shoot up all of these costs and so on? It's interesting times ahead. Interesting times ahead. They are opening up construction anyway on the 5th of April. So it'll be interesting to see how that starts to affect the supply chains as well, and what gets priority over the
bike.
Yeah, well, no, I won't. My tail of woe, one of my wheels had a crack in it, and I'm going to be waiting weeks now before I actually get the replacement. So won't be taking out the summer bike for the next few weeks. Anyway, in the last part of this, important 3PL IT capabilities. Again, management systems, electronic data interchange, transportation management, planning. Again, it's all the IT type systems that you're going. Web portals for booking, ordering, tracking, inventory. They're the more common ones that you have now. And the drivers in all of these right now is the next generation 5G data transmission and Internet of Things. And there's been a huge growth in this in Internet of Things and low energy Wi-Fi for all intents and purposes, for real-time tracking. So they've gone into this level. It's going there as soon as the networks start to roll out. You're looking over the next couple of years before you'll have full 5G coverage at least, and it's just pure data.
It's a little bit out of date because EDI has kind of gone the way of
it is, yeah, but it is, but if you look at it from the general concept, electronic data interchange, it's first G and 5G are essentially, it's a nice global term, to just for data management. And don't mind me. Not at all. But it's all data analytics anyway. That's what it's coming down to on the IT systems. So, and you have the different providers, then web portal tracking and visibility, order shipment, and we've had that for a number of years anyway. And but we've as customers, we've now become part of the transaction because we're going in, and companies are analyzing, how often is Mark going in to look at his order and to see where it's been tracked, and the frequency of people visiting to see where the product is. So it's data on top of data and so on. So that's given them a measure of the effectiveness of their systems. And they for example, if stuff goes, I had an order here locally in Ireland, actually interesting, about 2 weeks ago, and from an Irish company, and order was placed on the 6th of March. They shipped to on post on the 8th of March, and on the 15th of the Monday the 15th, still no sign of the product. So I was getting pretty ticked off, and I rang the company, and they actually said to me, we're going through a merger with another company and our 2 IT systems at the moment. Could you send an email to our support department? My Jesus, that was red rag to a bull. I said, are you kidding me? I said, you're having a laugh here, seriously. I said, I'm the customer, and you want me to send an email to your IT department with a copy of the invoice of the order that I placed, but I can't find your last order here was in February. I said, that's not my problem. It's your IT system, your merger going on. I said, I expect that you should be able to tell me where my product is, blah, blah, blah. Now, I was, of course, a bit annoyed at initially, so I did ease up on the young lady. As it happened, 36 hours later, I actually had my products. But the point about it was I couldn't track or see anything, and the explanation was the merge of their 2 systems. Again, they didn't do it correctly. They made a horse's ass of the merge and the IT systems, that the customers were left at this. And I actually came to the point and said, well, do you want me to cancel this through PayPal? And so, oh, no, don't do that. It wasn't very high value. It was €65 or something like that. But it was the fact that I was late, because it was a critical component that I was looking for. And, anyway. But the point is that systems now are going in to measure. Well, Mark went in 3 times, and we could see that it's still at on post. Where is it in the on post system, for example? Can we see it coming out? And you can judge by the time spent. Went in, see the order, then came in, saw that it was transferred there, then went on to high seas, we say, and then didn't bother coming back in to look at it. So the timing as to when I'm going in, are they following it rigidly to say that in 3 weeks' time it should be in port in Dublin? Did Mark go on to have a look at the system then and track his item, or did he wait a week later? And that gives an indication of the kind of flexibility that they could have in terms of the overseas delivery time. Was it 3 weeks or 4 weeks? What are all the other customers doing? Are they coming in 4 weeks later to have a look and see where it is? Or are they coming in bang on 3 weeks? Therefore, we need to tighten up. So we're looking at the data of how customers are tracking their orders is yeah, you can understand the importance in terms of measurability and so on. The IT gap one, pretty straightforward. Capabilities necessary for these and year on year, but the gap is reducing. And no doubt this was back in 2015. Systems are but the biggest how to say the barrier to closing the gap was the technology itself. But now it's become far more, and the phones themselves, using them for both business and tracking items, so on. Internet of Things keep coming up to the same items, and as you'll see 5G, so you start to see this IT gap closing, and you'll find that that IT companies will be potentially the fourth party, so they're able to extract data from all these different third parties and so on, and create the right data analytics, and therefore sell that as a service to companies. Watch that space. Again, management and relationship issues. So third-party expectations from customers, mutually beneficial long term. So in other words, building up your trust, openness, and sharing the information, giving them this is where your product is. It's gone into productions, out of productions, blah, blah, blah. Dedicating the right resources at the right levels, including so have the right team supporting the customers themselves. Again, these are the channels to customers, channels that you're using, and so if you had 1,000 customers that are only buying €10 worth of stuff once a week, do you focus on them, or do you focus on the 10 customers that buy €10,000 worth of product per week? You have to get the balance right, and the apparent easy answer, the 10 customers that buy €10,000 might sound more attractive and so on and so forth, but you could have 9 of those or 4 of those customers that are the biggest pain in the butt to actually deal with. They could be causing all sorts of consternations, and forcing issues around service level agreements and so on and so forth. So the type I'm talking about. We've all come across them as such in business, but they say, Jesus, it's just not worth the hassle dealing with that company and so on and so forth. Yeah, but you lose sales. Now, in terms of the way we operate, the grief that they're causing and so on and so forth, just shred them, get rid of them. But you do have to do that, and that's where you do your channel segmentation. Market segmentation and customer segmentation and cost to serve. We talked about that previously. And then fiduciary responsibility and overall fairness relative to pricing, what you can and can't do. Clearly defined service level agreements. We're nearly there, folks. How are we doing time-wise? We're a little bit over. Trends. Continued expansion, acquisition. Is there anything? IT capabilities, already talked about that. Two-tiered relationship model, strategic and tactical. The strategic one would be what I alluded to there a minute ago. The kind of IT type of companies, the data analytics, the Cambridge Analyticas of supply chain. These would be the more strategic type ones, and then you have the tactical ones where they have the more physical assets for your supply chain that you need. And that's a growing range of strategic services offered. Again, that's the likes of market analysis, new product introduction, sourcing different technologies, sourcing alternative. Back in 1984, I was doing an IDA grant submission for Ericsson on our assets, building and so on and so forth. And we amortized these grants over a period of time. But the chap that was coming down worked for a consultancy in BlackRock at the time. They were hired by IDA Ireland to come down and do the assessment of the grant application. And his background was he had worked with Marconi Communications in the UK for a number of years. What he was doing, learning accountancy because he wanted to get more into the data side of compliance and so on and so forth. But it was interesting. One side thing that he said, the old Shannon telephones, I don't know if you remember them, small kind of flat door, came in grey, red and green, dirty and push button type phones and so on, digital phones. They were known as Shannon telephones, and sold through Telecom Éireann. But underneath them, you had this aluminium strip, the label, the model, and this, that, and the other thing, and so on, which we used to have manufactured in Sweden, sent over here to Ireland, stuck on the phones on our production lines in Athlone when we had them, and that was it. But he knew of a company down in Meath that also made similar type labels and set up a linkage. That's the kind of knowledge we're alluding to 40 years later. You know, they know other people and other products. So we were able to get this product at less than 50% of the cost that the Swedes were paying for to ship it and send it over here to us in Ireland. And by this guy getting onto Ericsson's approved supplier list, it was like going to the bank with, an open checkbook for the guy, you know. So there was a win-win left, right, and centre. So that's the kind of stuff in a very small, simple example from 40 years ago. Now move forward to all this data and the sourcing new materials, looking at the trends and technologies that could impact on your production processes. And these guys can spot that and say, hey, do you know what's happening over here? That's what they're doing. This is this technology. You could use that and maybe replace them. We could redesign the components for you before they even come into you. That's the level it's heading towards, mostly in the electronics fields at the moment. And then that's just a summary, folks. What is it? The most prevalent 3PL services used are transportation, warehousing, and so on. That's where we're moving beyond 3PLs into 4 and 5 PLs. Okay, 10 minutes over time. Any questions? Comments?
Insults, we'll hold them.
I know you can post them to a nondescript email service that.
I'll send them via EDI to you.
Yeah, hey, exactly. Yeah, lost like my product. Anyway, folks, I'll let you go. We'll see you on Wednesday night. All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Enjoy the remainder of the weekend. Take it easy. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome. I actually, while you're there, I'll just see if I can show you. I had threatened to do this. Watch this. Can you see that?
Oh, class.
I just let it run there for a second or two.
You have a green screen, do you?
Yeah.
I was wondering how you were doing it all, to be honest with you.
Well, there you have it. It's
some setup, man.
And you see this tablet down here?
Yeah.
That's just a small Android tablet. That's controlling everything. It's
You've got
all.
lighting and everything set up.
That's the whole. That's 90% of the battle. Well, not it's having even as I'm sitting here today, I have that same type of. Actually, in fact, I have the screen down. That's a DSLR camera. That's a C920. I actually had 4 cameras. I had 2 other cameras up here. There is another one up there which I don't use. There's a microphone over my head, which you're hearing me talking through now.
Yeah.
And
what program are you using?
I'm using what's known as OBS
yeah.
Studio, and there's the stats showing that I'm actually running at my rendering time up here. I'm looking at the stats beside me. I'm pushing out 1080p at 30 frames per second.
Yeah.
And average 9.4 milliseconds. I'm averaging around 6 milliseconds. I have no drop frames. I have frames missed due to rendering lag. I have 71 frames lost out of 220,000. Now, if you consider a frame is less than a fraction of a second, that's the kind of setup. I just had to do that for one of my colleagues, but that was built from the ground up.
When did you do that? Did you do that at the start of COVID, or when did you do it?
I started doing that. It would have been. I was actually doing something small in March last year. I had just a webcam and a laptop. I've 3 of these Surface Pros, different models of it. I don't use that light anymore. I have a smaller light. I've reconfigured some of this stuff since then. The chair I have there, I've actually a green screen over the chair. That's why you don't see the back part of it as well.
Yeah.
You're only seeing just seeing me, and it's and the of course the library goes back behind that screen as well. Yeah, and in front of the window for more. Now that's brought down further, and on Wednesday night sessions I've closed that because it reflects light even better again. And these lights are actually on as we speak. There's a ring light now in here, and that light is on, that light, and this big diffuser light is just behind me to light up the green screen and create depth of field. That's why when in my case there, when I show you now, using a DSLR camera, I don't use that for these recordings because there's a bit of a lag. The quality is exceptional. It's even better. I can actually, if I just stop this now.
Mark, can I ask a question? Like, if you were doing it in a meeting room,
Yeah.
what like equipment would you recommend then for that?
What would I recommend for a meeting room? You really, now again, I'm using, I'm looking into OBS. You see, OBS, I'm feeding this into Zoom. The small camera that I have in front of me, I'm using a Logitech C920 is the camera, and it's excellent. It's one of the industry standards, so to speak. It's been around a long time, and it's about 80 euros, 70 or 80 euros. During the lockdown, you couldn't get one of those. You wouldn't get change out of 200, 300 euros. Supply and demand. Now, webcams as they go standalone. I mean, the ones you have on your laptops and all that are you know, okay, and then you have these standalone ones, the likes of the Logitech, and then there's other ones you can spend a little bit more on, and they give you better quality. Again, knowing what to look for. Now the C920 is up now. See, if you look at my presentation here, you see my background is blurred, and there was a reason for that. And if I go into my main screen here, for example, again, that's blurred all around me. That was a picture, and I literally just took it out of focus. I put a bit of a blur effect, and then I loaded it into my software here, and that creates the depth of field. So it gives you the effect of a digital camera. Your DSLR, your Canon, Nikon, and all those type of cameras, Panasonic, they're the best systems. If you want to have a really good camera, you look at a DSLR camera and connect that into your laptop or into your OBS or Zoom. That's giving you excellent quality. But as Paul said, the absolutely critical is lighting. Now, the lighting, those big rigs that I have up there and all that stuff came in a nice, tidy, portable bag, like a rucksack type thingy, and the green screen and all that. I think I paid 60 quid for that on eBay. My whole setup here, excluding that camera, you probably get change out of 400 euros.
Jeez, I have some young lads here that want to be YouTubers. They'll love
Well,
to hear that.
Well, that's what it is, and you know, and OBS is free. It's an open source broadcast. That's what it stands for. It's a free software. The Filmora, someone commented on my Filmora there. What was that? Patty Scott. That's the beauty of Wondershare Filmora, Mark. Don't know if I missed that one. That came through in the middle of. Anyway, I use one of the software, and I think it was $59 for license for that, and that's where I do all my video editing and introductions and all that sort of stuff.